This is your brain, but the way that you're working right now means that your brain completely burns out and you can't do any work. But I'm going to explain exactly how to work so burnout is literally impossible. I'm Jeevan and I spent 6 years studying at Cambridge Medical School learning to be a doctor and a mental health researcher. So I've spent the better part of a decade learning the biology, the neuroscience and the psychology of human behavior. And ironically, over those years, I've burnt myself out many times. And so I've learned exactly how to avoid it and how to work hard consistently. So there's a useful concept that we can use called decision fatigue, which is popularized by Roy Baumeister in the early 2000s. So they tested two identical groups at the end of the day on their mental performance, and they showed that when they gave one group a lot of difficult decisions to make and temptations to resist, they performed worse at the end of the day. So that experiment found that we have a limited amount of fuel to use for mental energy every single day, and every decision or every cognitive thing that we have to do burns some of that fuel. So our mental energy gets used throughout the day and our ability to do hard work gets smaller and smaller. But there is one exception to this that you yourself will have experienced before. A lot of adrenaline will force you to stay up and get the work done in the short term. So if you're really stressed, like you have a deadline tomorrow, adrenaline and all the other hormones surging in your body will help you to keep going, but you will always crash afterwards because you are burning tomorrow's fuel today. You can do that in the short term, but the best way to consistently work hard is to manage your energy so you never burn out. This is my model for how to consistently work hard over time. The decision fatigue model implies that we have this finite fuel source that gets used up throughout the day, but I think that when we have breaks, we can recharge some of that energy. So if we recharge tactically, we can access more fuel each day. Okay, so this model of how to work hard consistently is inspired by a basic physics model about how much force you can apply to a material before it snaps. Stress is related to the force applied to the material, and strain is related to how much stretch is occurring. So at the very start of this graph, the more that you add force to this material, it stretches in about the same amount. If you're working with low numbers here and you double the amount of force that you apply, then you double the amount of stretch. And so this occurs in what you call the elastic zone. So this is elastic behavior, when you increase the amount of force, but it also increases in length proportionally. And this is all well and good until you get to this point here where things start changing. And then when you start adding a tiny little bit more force, then you get a much bigger amount of stretch, and this is where you're approaching breaking point, because you just add a little bit more force and it snaps. And so this is exactly the same as us when it comes to doing our work. So instead of stress, you can think about it as, work input, and instead of strain, you can think about it as recovery time. So here at the very bottom, let's say you work for 15 minutes. Yeah, you might need, a couple minutes to recover. Let's say you work 45 minutes. Yeah, you might need 15 minutes to recover, and you're in this nice elastic zone. And then let's say you get to 90 minutes. You might need half an hour to recover, right? That's all good because you can do that consistently and recover in a reasonable amount of time. But the moment you get past that point, you're approaching breaking point, because then you might do a little bit more work. Let's say you start working 3 hours. But then your recovery time increases much more. So if your continuous work increases past a certain point, it can make it such that you need days to recharge. And that is where you're burnt out. So if you want to prevent burnout, then you have to stay in the elastic zone. And there are a few ways to do that. So one thing you can do is to cut unnecessary tasks. Most of the tasks that we have to do are not that important. And so when you find out which are the most high leverage activities you need to do, ignore the rest. And then you can cut the overall amount of time that you felt like you had to do work. And then when you identify those high yield tasks, chunk them into small bits so you can accomplish them in smaller bursts of work. And then you have to take regular breaks. I'm not a big Pomodoro guy. I think you can work for much longer than 25 minutes. So I would say probably about 90 minutes. And Andrew Huberman says this as well. 90 minutes is a good time for a burst of work. I think that's probably the top end of the elastic zone where you can recharge pretty fast and then go again. This will stop you from getting tired so you can consistently work for more hours. But if you don't know how to focus, those hours are useless. So if you want to increase your focus and maximize those hours, then click this video on screen where I explain everything that you need to know to master your focus.